Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds.
Or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. Today, Amy and I have special guest, Suzanne Axelsson from Sweden. Before we get going with our conversation, I just wanted to give you all a quick introduction. Suzanne works within the world of early childhood. I often describe her as, and I think you describe yourself, Suzanne, as an activist, an advocate for play. And Suzanne was recently here in Michigan to help lead and keynote and share with others at the Purposeful Gatherings event that I host in the early childhood world. And after the event, Suzanne and our colleague Roberta from Italy spent a few days. We tried to do nothing much of the time, but spent a few days sitting on my screened-in porch and just reflecting back on the conversations and work we had done, but also thinking forward. We were doing some planning for an upcoming study group that we're planning for Sweden in May of 2026, and also just talking about books that we had been reading and things that we were interested in. And several times in those conversations, Suzanne talked about nice and kind. Some of the differences that she's noticed, and in that process, we agreed that change how we behave and how we interact with others when we think about what we're doing with children, what we're offering to children, and even in our adult worlds when it comes to nice and kind. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to come on the podcast and share some of those thoughts with us. And so that is my really long-winded introduction to why we have Suzanne here with us today and what we think we're going to talk about as we move forward into the next few minutes. So with all of that, welcome, Suzanne, and thank you for joining us. What did I miss that you want to share in terms of an introduction to yourself or why we're having this conversation?
I think, and you didn't miss anything, but I think my focus has always been on social justice, on fairness, including all people and being aware. And it's something that's been from my childhood. And I think maybe we add autistic to that. As an autistic person, that maybe I see the world with a slightly different lens. And this veneer of niceness sometimes just doesn't feel authentic enough for me. And I've tried juggling with this experience of niceness without the kindness behind it. And so I think it really came to light being in the US this time and hearing a lot of niceness, a lot of very polite way of speaking to each other, while at the same time the country is kind of so polarized and there's so much hate and vitriol going on. I'm trying to wonder, what is the difference between niceness and kindness? And are we only teaching niceness? And then when that idea of niceness is no longer needed, as what seems to be occurring in more and more countries around the world, there's no kindness underneath to keep things moving forward and to keep things grounded and to keep us together as a community.
I'm wondering if you might be willing to kind of give us your definition of each for our listeners, because I think so many people think about them as one thing. And I love what you're saying, that they're different. So for those that are listening, I'm wondering if you might kind of spell out what each of them actually is in reference to what you're talking about.
Did you know that the word nice comes from the Latin word nescius, meaning ignorant? It evolved to mean timid or faint-hearted. And eventually came to mean pleasant or satisfying or pleasing, agreeable or delightful. Kind has roots in Middle English, meaning friendly or deliberately doing good, the other. Or from the German word Kind, meaning kin. I think sometimes looking at words and their original meanings can give a lot of insight into, you see, that's my autistic word nerd too.
Wow. When I think about those definitions and the goals that we have for ourselves, the goals that we have for our children, and what we're teaching them, which do you want?
I also like this. Kindness is proactive and care orientated, while niceness is reactive and I orientated.
Wow.
All these little bits that are out there in the world making you think about niceness and kindness and how they're interconnected, but at the same time, it is only problematic when we replace kindness with niceness. If we have niceness and kindness, everything is good. But when we think the word nice means kind, we're in a bit of a problem. So niceness kind of goes in together with this politeness. We're nice, and I think it comes a lot from this need to be accepted by others and liked by others. So for me, the difference between kindness and niceness is that kindness is rooted in a genuine empathy, understanding, caring for other people, and that we're doing it because we know it's the right thing, because we know it's going to support other people. We're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it because it's rooted in this sense of a strong self-identity and self-love. Now, we don't need someone to see what we're doing to do the right thing or to be kind. While being nice is more of a veneer. It's saying things in a correct way in order to be liked and accepted, or what society expects you to do. Not necessarily with kindness behind it, because we can say nice things and be unkind at the same time, while we can say no and be very firm with kindness and say things that might affront people at first, but it's done with the intention for that person's well-being and your own well-being. And I think this niceness comes in with those hollow sorries, which when you're teaching children to say sorry, and they're just learning to say a word and not to actually feel genuine empathy with the person and remorse and a sense of vulnerability. And the same with thank you. You say thank you as an automatic rather than from genuine gratitude and appreciation. Niceness comes from a place where if someone wants to be seen to be nice, so you will only pick up the litter, so to speak, or, the garbage or the rubbish outside if you know someone's watching you, if you're being nice. But kindness, you'll do it at any time of the day with or without people watching. So that's the difference, because the niceness is about an expectation that other people will be grateful for what you're doing, while kindness is not having any expectation. But kindness ripples onwards, and it releases all these oxytocin and all these feel-good things that will be released to other people. And we do need niceness. It's not saying we should be kind instead of nice. We need niceness too. We're forgetting kindness, I think. And I think sometimes we're calling niceness kindness, and it's not the same. It's hollowed out version of kindness.
Right. Number one, I love your description of the rippling out and the rippling forward, because by complete chance, I think for the first time all summer, my husband is sitting in a canoe right in front of my window fishing. And as you said it, his lure hit the water and I could see the ripple move out. So it was that perfect example of thinking about how that can move forward. At the same time, I was thinking about so many conversations I've had over time with people who work with young children, and the debate about should they say I'm sorry or shouldn't they say I'm sorry? And
Mm.
what's the expectation? And some of those differences between, well, are we forcing them to say something and it's just words, and versus do they understand the consequences of whatever action it is that they took that might have harmed someone else, and the fact that we really would hope that they're thinking about the results of their actions and how that impacts someone else, and thinking about that and considering their feelings and what is it that you might do to think about your behavior in the future, but also is there something that needs to happen right now because of that event that just happened?
It's a lot of what I was doing when I was working with young children, was supporting them to understand each other. I think maybe kindness is rooted in listening as well, as in listening to understand. So if they'd done something, I would never have an automatic sorry. Our usual response was always, I see you're upset. Is there anything I can do? And that was what our standard thing was, instead of a sorry, because it gave them the opportunity to pause, notice that someone was upset, realize I was the cause of that upsetness, and then find out what can I do. And for some children, saying sorry was what they wanted to hear. For other children was, can you help me rebuild it since you knocked it over? There was these different ways of saying it. It also gave the person who had something done to them that they didn't like an opportunity to voice what it was that they needed, and why they felt sad. And that became more of a we feeling, a community feeling, rather than just a series of individuals saying stuff without understanding each other. And I think we've taken the ability to understand each other away from young children who become adults who don't know how to do that. And I think this has been happening for well over, probably a couple of generations. So I don't think we as adults have that ability necessarily to always understand the difference between niceness and kindness. I think we should always strive to be kind. One of the parts of original learning is I say that, as educators, we have the responsibility of always being kind, because children are still learning how to be kind. And there's all sorts of skills that we need to be able to be kind. And it takes bravery to be kind. It takes curiosity to be kind. It takes self-regulation to be kind. It takes listening skills to be kind. There's so many skills that have to be used, that we have to practice throughout our entire childhoods, so that we can be kind. And then we can't be kind all of the time. It's impossible, because sometimes people hurt us, and then our own reactions are going to be, it's not possible for us to be kind when people who have hurt us or hurt people we love, that we allow to give ourselves a break from that as well.
Yes.
I think
yes.
maybe niceness doesn't allow us to be authentic and to show our failures, because we have to fake being nice and polite, and that gets to be the default line instead of being kind, which allows us to be open to our vulnerabilities, allows us to make mistakes, and to be received with that kindness of going and support to keep on going and to be resilient. But niceness means we have to kind of fake it. And I think that's where it grinds with my autistic way of seeing it. It's like, huh? what are we doing? This person isn't being genuine with me. They're saying all the right things, but their body language is saying something else.
Yeah, that disingenuine piece, you feel it, you see it, you notice it, and it almost makes you wanna say, "Stop, just I'd rather you not pretend and do nothing than give me what you think I wanna hear in a way that has nothing behind it." It's fluff.
And I think community is about connection, and there's no connection in that fluff, is there? There's it's the kindness is where we connect. That gap between the niceness and the kindness makes that connection so much harder.
I know that you have written about this at least a little bit I'm going to guess in your Substack. Yes. Okay. And I recall catching a glimpse maybe of a phrase where you said kindness can't be taught. But and I might be misspeaking that. And so please correct me, because what I think I just heard you say, number one, because I use your book, The Original Learning Approach, in my teaching, I'm hearing the threads of
Mm,
teaching and learning as you're speaking. I'm hearing curiosity, I'm hearing listening, I'm hearing connection, and wondering if those are the pieces that so come together into that weave that creates true kindness, that it's not the kindness that can be taught, but these skills of listening and you know, so forth,
absolutely.
curiosity.
Absolutely. And I think that's with a lot of things we don't, and it's like care and kindness and love. All of these things can't be taught, and joy. They
Right.
can't be taught. We can experience them. And what we do is set up the environment so that children are more likely to experience these things, and to become them, like democratic. You
Mhm.
can't teach democracy, but we can give children the skills to be democratic. I mean, truly democratic. I mean, if we're to be really nitpicking, I don't think there is a truly democratic nation in the entire world, because in most countries in the world, there are people who are othered and people who are not having equal status and who are not safe and who are being persecuted and experiencing bias and prejudice. In a truly democratic space, then everyone would have equal value. I think we strive to be democratic, and I think there are many countries in the world where they're losing losing their democracy, sometimes a little bit too fast. So I do definitely think it's about listening. It is about giving children the skills that they need. I mean, even listening itself requires a whole range of skills to be able to master as well. And that's what I've always focused on my teaching. How do we speak to each other? How do we develop empathy? How do we create community? How do we support each other? How do we self-regulate enough to be able to do all of these things? How can we have patience? These are all skills that we need as adults, and children need to be developing these skills throughout their lives and practicing them. And that's why my play advocacy is this is where we practice. And in play, you can make mistakes without it having dire real life consequences, because it's in this little realm of play. It's not kind of real life with citation marks.
Mhm.
It's this practice realm of being. And within that, you're going to practice being kind. And sometimes children are going to be unkind in that practice. And if we see children saying and doing unkind things, I don't like it when adults say you need to be kind or that's unkind. I think we have to try and use different words now. I don't have them on me at the moment because I'm still
Mhm.
working through all of this myself. Is how do we encourage children to learn the skills they need to be kind?
You just touched on something Amy and I talk about regularly, which is sort of giving ourselves permission to be new at something. And we're here in adulthood, midlife, whatever you want to call it, and we get so trapped in this idea that we can't make mistakes, that
Mm,
we can't be human almost, right? And it stops us, it hinders us from opening the doors to new things, to new places, to new people, to new foods, to new hobbies or skills if we're not able to be new at something. And so I
mm,
love that as you talk about this, again, the reason I asked you, would you please talk about this on our podcast, was because the way that you think always challenges me to be more open to curiosity and ask questions, and opens that door to giving myself permission to be new and early. And you're here talking about it. I've seen you write about it. And yet you just said, I don't have the words yet because I'm still trying to figure it out. It's so present and so forward in the encounters that you're having and the ways that you even think about play and talk about play. And so I just love that you described yourself as still learning.
Always, always. I think the day we stop learning is the day we die, because that's what the brain is constantly adapting to the circumstances we are in right now. And like the saying goes, we never step into the same river twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing, even in children's play, when they're repeating the same game over and over, it's never exactly the same. It's changed, it's tweaking, it's different. They're practicing and refining the skills or the knowledge or the muscle memory or whatever it is. It's getting better, it's being more refined, and they're learning something different, and they will respond differently because maybe it's wet one day and dry another day and hot another day, and that will change the play as well. Or it's a different adult that's watching and observing and interacting. So it's constant change. We will never stop learning.
Suzanne, it also makes me wonder then, so if we have a listener, and so I know that you had mentioned like you don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but you know it needs to happen. And learning is that opportunity. What happens if we do have a listener who says, you know what, niceness has always served its purpose in the way that I grew up or within my background, just being nice ended a uncomfortable situation or stopped a conversation or it served their purpose, but they're ready or maybe willing to realize that that's no longer serving their purpose. You talked at the very beginning about how like saying no with kindness, some of those pieces, but you also talked a little bit about, you know, bringing in curiosity, learning how to listen, those types of things. So would you be willing to the adult listener at home who's saying, I want to work on my kindness. I don't want to only just be nice. And also, I see what that's done to me and it hasn't worked in the way that I've wanted it to. So what are those areas that they really could start with? Because it is that combination.
I think it has to come from a willingness to be open, a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to make mistakes. I think it's much easier when you have people who love you around you that can support you in this process as well. I think asking yourself questions of where am I coming from, where am I going, and what is the purpose of what I'm trying to do with this? Why do I want to try kindness rather than niceness? What is it I want with that? Why am I not satisfied with the niceness? Because niceness is absolutely a part of this. But it's like you were just mentioning about if the niceness is being used to cut an uncomfortable conversation short, but that uncomfortable conversation would have actually led to a kindness and a difference in someone else's life, then we need to be thinking about bravery, don't we? Do I feel brave to feel that level of discomfort, to be able to say, no, my discomfort, somebody else's discomfort is not okay to gloss over and forget about and heal that when it's somebody else's well-being that is being sacrificed for that. And I think a lot of the time we do get to that moment, and especially as we white women, as we sit here, we have a level of comfortability that should demand that we feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, and I'm not recommending anyone do this, this was my own personal thing, I allowed myself to get lost in the forest. I chose a small forest on a small island, so I could never get lost for more than 8 hours because I could walk around the whole island in 8 hours. I had kind of limited how lost I could get. But the idea was in this lostness and in this unknowing and in this uncertainty, I could come to terms with what discomfort feels like. It took many months before I allowed myself to get lost because the instinct for self-preservation and feeling comfortable is so strong. And I could always work out where the lake was and where the sun was shining, so I knew where I was. So it was on a wind-still day when it was cloudy that I actually finally got lost following animal paths, and it was terrifying. And my first time, and when I did it, I was like, the first thing that went through my head was, I'm a lone woman in the forest. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is something that has been drummed into our female heads. And there's another thought that comes into it. Girls ought to be nice more than boys.
Yeah.
As a way of managing girls' power, women's power. Another thought just for you. But eventually I kind of worked out where I was, managed to get back home, and it took me a couple of hours to recombobulate. And I think that has actually helped me with feeling more comfortable with my discomfort. That I could go through that discomfort. It wasn't nice when I was experiencing it, but afterwards I realized I learned so much from that experience. And I keep unpacking things constantly from that experience. And that was in 2020, 2021. And I can still I can go back there and read my notes, remember the things that happened, and find a new way of interpreting it and applying it to my everyday life now, or the way I'm teaching, or my pedagogy, or my play activism. So this is why I think that it does require a level of bravery to go through that threshold of discomfort to then, on the other side, realize, aha, that's why it's important. And I think kindness requires us to do that. And I think that's why sometimes it's hard to be kind. And then I do absolutely, like I mentioned before, there are going to be some thresholds that are going to be too hard, too painful, too traumatic for us to go over, and we're not supposed to. But then if people have treated us badly or hurt loved ones or whatever, those thresholds, I think, we have the right to stay on the nice side of that. And
I
sometimes maybe not even the nice side.
Yeah, yeah, and what a beautiful way to think about the value and the necessity of risk and giving yourself an opportunity to take risks within some safety boundaries, parameters that you set up so that you could feel the discomfort, and when your body wouldn't allow that for many times in a row, you kept trying and you showed that persistence and finally got to that point where within those boundaries you still finally found that place where the risk gave you that discomfort. You took the time and the repetition to keep drawing on that strength of bravery and therefore building that muscle and growing that strength within that boundary. Though those boundaries are so important.
And I do think that children have that strength and that bravery naturally, and that we tame it out of them
Yes.
by being nice. But they have the capacity. They are empathic. I mean, I have twins, identical girls, and I saw the empathy from the very beginning. They have that empathy. They have that ability to understand and take care of each other genuinely. And then it's replaced with these niceties and expectations. I mean, for me, I remember moving to Sweden, and they don't use thank you in the same way that we do, and they don't have a word for please. And all of my childhood being raised in the UK, where you got to say your please and thank yous. And also now in this country where, kindness doesn't demand these words. You can still be kind and receive with gratitude without these words being said.
Wow. I feel like the need to say a couple of things. And Amy, do you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I just want to say thank you. I've really been fascinated with this conversation, and I think it's so in line with some of the other things that we've talked about, but I think it's a wonderful, timely conversation for all the reasons that you mentioned, political climate and all of those kind of things too. But I think as we think about our children and the way that we want our children to grow up, we want them to have a voice first and foremost. And I think what they do with that voice is where this conversation goes so beautifully, is
Mm,
that we're not trying to not allow, a child to speak or those types of things, but understanding what they say actually has meaning or has weight behind it. And as adults, if we haven't learned that, it's a wonderful time to learn it, at least to take it in, or if you haven't, to think about, right? I mean, if it's not something you've done, to think about. So I just think that that's been so wonderful to listen to you talk about and kind of put it all together. Cheryl, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well,
Thanks.
I want to thank you for being the not fussy person from Sweden. And really, I also want to thank you for really putting it out there that you may see things in a different way because of your autism. That's how you worded it. And even around that, there's so often so many negative connotations. And I just find every time I have a conversation with you that hearing the way that you see something makes me almost excited to think and to grow more. And so just feeling very grateful that you're using your autistic way of thinking, I guess, as something beautiful and a way to nudge all of us into opening new doors and using our curiosity to see things differently. And I think I just want to offer a shameless plug that, in May of 2026, my other colleague Alex and I are taking a group of people to go visit Sweden and explore Sweden and actually Finland with Suzanne and be able to fully embrace some of those adventures and ways of thinking. And if you're curious, let us know. But we definitely will be in our show notes making links to your social media, Suzanne, to your Substack. So please feel free to give us any of those links you want us to share out there, and just really open the invitation to anyone to connect with Suzanne in all the ways.
Ooh, all the ways,
All the ways.
all the kind ways.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us today and sharing more about niceness and kindness. And thank you for opening that door to thinking differently about niceness and kindness and what that might mean in terms of our own behavior and thoughts and the ways that we create environments and participate environments for the children we're with, but also for our family members and for our communities and the people that we spend time with.
Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going, because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.